Hello and welcome to Retail Management BUS302. This is our third lecture in week number 4, where we're talking about retail strategy and our location. So far, we've talked about the different types of location, both planned and unplanned locations, as well as some non-traditional locations. We then looked at some of the factors that companies would want to consider when they're trying to make a decision as far as various within various locations, whether you're trying to evaluate a site and everything else. So we talked about that in lecture number 2, along with some legal, societal factors, all those things. In this particular video, what we want to do is in video number 2, I talked a lot about being close to your customers, right? That target market and everything else. So what we really want to focus on in this video is talking about these trade areas, right? So because that's really that's what we're talking about when we talk about site location is our trade area. So when we talk about a trade area, we are talking about an area that has 50 to 70% of the customers that you want. Right. And so that's your primary trade area. So you want to know what that is so you can locate within reasonable distance and everything, right? Your secondary trade area is going to account for 20 to 30% of your store sales, right? So when you start talking about this could be anywhere from 70 to 100% when you talk your primary and secondary trade areas, right? So there is the tertiary or fringe trade areas, right? These are people who come from really long dispersed areas. They have to travel long distances. And as I've mentioned, I live in Iowa. I live in Northeast Iowa. And there's nothing really close to where I live. And so for my wife and I, we are really more of that tertiary trading area when we need to get. So if we want to go to a Sam's Club, it's like an hour and a half drive for us. So that would be, we're on the real fringe, right? So for Sam's Club, their primary and secondary target areas is generally within about 30 to 40 miles. And so we are definitely more on that tertiary. So those are when you start thinking about that, that's really what we're looking at is how do we define these trade areas? And when we talk about trade areas, you can look at a map, right? And you want to define it and say, okay, well, this is going to be the trade area. Now, this could be a trade area simply because you've got nice geographic areas. Maybe you've got the different ring suburbs and everything else. But when you think about it, these are factors that can affect your trade, the accessibility, the natural physical barriers, right? So when you start looking here, some of the accessibility of highways and everything else, you might think about that within that, but the natural and physical barriers, how much competition is within a certain area. Maybe it's the nature of merchandise that you're offering, alternatives, if people have an alternative location to go through. So these are factors that would affect the size of your trade area. So one of the things that you want to really focus on when you start thinking about these trade areas is where are your customers? And we use this process called customer spotting. So we actually place we take some time and on a map, we'll map out where our customers are relative to our store to get an idea of where that, that primary trade area is, where we're getting 50 to 70% of our sales, right? So that is one of those things where you can actually just plot on a map where your customers are. Now, another way that you can get some information about your trade area or different things is you can go to the U.S. Census Bureau. A census is done every 10 years. And right, so as you go through, the census is then going to produce all this data, and it's going to give you all this demographic data. So you can use that demographic data to really figure out if you know your customer target, if you have a target demographic for your customers, you can use that information to plot to figure out where your primary trade area is. So when you start thinking about this, again, now we're going to combine the demographic to the geographic, right? So we can use a GIS, Geographic Information System, and we can plot all this on a map. And we can say, okay, well, we have branch number 1 here, branch number 2 here, branch number 3, right? We've got all these things. And we see this overlap. And as we're looking at it going, wow, that right in the center of the map, we don't have anything right there. So we want to put a new branch right there. And we can see this by just using a map, right? So this is a really cool technology. And because we have Google Maps and everything else, we're able to use this more and more, right? These, as we define our trade areas and everything else. So now, some of the information within a GIS report, again, this is geographic. So the geographic is more than just the map. Within the geographic information system, you're going to know the gender, income, disability, all these different things about the people that live within those areas. This is really powerful information. It's super powerful, right? And so the company that I actually like to use when I talk about GIS is ESRI, Ursa. They are just an incredible company. And you can go to their website, and they actually define things by tapestry. So what they've done is and you can look up your specific area, right? Your specific zip code, and it will tell you what your tapestry is, right? So they have 67 distinct segments based on demographic and socioeconomic characteristics. And they will tell you things like this particular group likes their pickup trucks, or they will drive this, or they will do this, right? So it is really specific, and you can, in your head, as you're reading this, you can see people that are living within those areas. So I would encourage you to look at the tapestry, right? The other thing that you want to know, not just the tapestry in those segments, but what's the spending in, the potential spending within an area, right? So when you start looking nationally, we know what the average is. And with this type of data, we can say, okay, this local area has this type of spending versus the national average. So that will help us decide, maybe we want to be in more of a specific area. So the GIS information is very, very powerful. So other things that you want to think about within your trade areas, right? You got to think about the competition. Who are you going to be up against, right? So to get that information, as you're looking and trying to figure out where you want to locate, you want to look at other retailers' websites, Yelp, talk to the Chamber of Commerce, and look at, talk to in depth. You'll definitely want to talk to the municipal and city and county governments people, because they will have ideas on what you can and can't do. So you want to definitely get them on board as soon as possible. Now, you may think that's crazy. In Northeast Iowa, the last town that we lived in, it took Dollar General. They were wanting to move into our town. I think it took them 6 years to work, and they never really got the city council's approval. What they ended up having to do is buy out the local grocery store. That's the only way they were able to get their store into this one town, because the city government was not going to do anything with zoning. So we start talking about zoning and everything else. You want to get government on board as soon as possible. All right. So last thing we want to do in this section, as we talk about site selection and everything else, let me walk you through an example of a site selection. Right. The company is this Edward Beaner company. They are a purveyor of fine eyewear. They sell glasses and everything else. And they've decided they want to move. They want to open a new store and everything else. So they're going to use more of an analog approach to some sites. And so with that, the way that they're going to do this is the approach, right? They're going to conduct competitive analysis. They're going to define their present trade area, analyze the characteristics, and then figure out where should we go based on, based on what we find out, which site should we choose? So the first thing they want to do is they want to conduct this competitive analysis, right? So they go through, and in your book, there's an exhibit, right? They have all these different places that they've looked at, and right, they are looking at competition, everything else. So one competitor, everything else. They've defined their present trade area. They've looked at zones based on drive times. They want to be 5 minutes for their primary target trade area, 10 minutes for the secondary, and 20 minutes for the tertiary. They want easy access. So they want the different highways and everything else. So they want all these things in there as they're looking at the trade area. Right. So as they're going through, whoops, there we go. There's the trade area. So as we're looking at this, they've highlighted the colors, right? Their primary, their secondary, right? And then their tertiary, the green. And you can see here where they've got the highways and everything else. So they define the trade area. They've got all these different locations, right? So that's the trade area. They've laid out some different sites. So the trade area, they got site A, B, C, and D. So they have the number of eyeglasses per year per person. They have the trade area populations for that is going to be in those site selections. And when they come up with a total eyeglass potential, what they're doing is they're saying, okay, with site A, there's like 91,000, we'll call it 92,000 people. So we'll times that by 0.2. So this is our potential. And out of that potential, we're going to estimate that we're going to sell 15,800, right? So, or there's going to be 15,800 eyeglasses sold total within that from the potential. And then they'll say, okay, within the trade area, this is the number of potential units that they'll get. And they calculate the percentage, right? So as they go through, they've got these different factors that they're looking at. So you got site A, where they'll get 13%, site B, 38%, site C, 6%, and site D, 18.2%. So we lay out this based on our competition and everything else. Okay, once again, we laid out our competition area. So when we talk about the trade characteristics, we know that in the trade area, average household income, we do the 3-mile ring, population more 50% Hispanic. And so we then would match the characteristics, right? Current trade area, they need high income, white collar occupants, percentage of older residents, upscale geodemographics. So they want, right, and relatively low competition. So this is what they want in their trade area. So that's where they would match it with everything. And then finally, as we come in, again, site A, B, C, and D. Okay. So site A, average household income, white collar, percentage residents over 45, predominant geographic, young immigrants, gray power, level of competition is low. Site C, average income's high, right? Young literaries, lots of competition, right? And again, when you look at site B, right, it hits all of those items, right? You've got the average household income, so they want high income, white collar, but they want that large percentage of older residents. And that's that gray power, right? So 80%. So as they go through, they can use all this data to help choose the site. So this is how you would go through that process. Hopefully this makes sense. I know this example is also in the book, so you can follow along in the book. And with that brings us to the end of our lecture number 3, and we'll pick up in lecture number 4.